In a previous video, I showed you how to make a mahogany crossband inlay. Now I'd like to show you how to make a slightly more complex geometric inlay banding. The process starts by laying out the final result that you want to have when you're done. The real secret to making these inlay bandings is to be able to imagine how the wood parts are going to go together once you're done slicing and dicing. This pattern is made up of 3 1/8 inch thick layers of wood to form a 3/8 inch wide banding. The process begins by ripping stock into 1/8 inch thick strips. In this case, I'm using walnut and maple. The process is made up of stacking and recutting those stacks and then restacking them again in different ways to create a geometric pattern. The pattern begins to take shape by gluing together alternating pieces of light and dark stock. I made up an equal number of stacks consisting of dark wood with light in the middle or light wood with dark in the middle. Once the stacks have dried in the clamps, they can be taken out and the edges cleaned up using the jointer or a hand plane. These initial stacks are then ripped again. This pattern calls for 3/8 inch wide and 1/8 inch wide strips in both color patterns. All of these various sized and colored pieces are now glued together side by side, following the pattern that we had sketched out at the beginning, and again clamped and left overnight to dry. Once dry, a scraper or a block plane can be used to flatten and smooth the top and bottom surfaces, leaving us with one section of our overall pattern when viewed from the end. This patterned plank that we've created is now crosscut into equal length sections, which are glued together to create a repeating pattern plank with the grain going in the opposite direction. Throughout this process, you want to keep the parts as tight together as possible when you're gluing them. You want to be removing as little material as possible when smoothing and straightening things out after a glue up. Each time you have to remove material, you risk distorting the pattern. The final step of the construction process is to add facing to both sides of our plank. These will provide a solid black band of trim on each side of the inlay banding once we rip it to its final dimension. These facing pieces can be clamped between blocks, or better yet, in a vacuum veneer press. Finally, clean up one edge of this stack after it's dried, and use a thin Ripp Jig on the table saw to slice off the pieces of inlay banding that you're going to need. The thin Ripp Jig with a zero clearance table saw insert allows you to cut very, very thin pieces until you have enough for your project. Find more great skill building content like this by visiting my website www.consultingwoodworker.com.